Hello, Germany. This is Bill Borman and Australia calling from Sydney. I know I was in the programme, and I'm sorry I can't be with you, but I'm delighted that missing my words and thoughts. I've been asked to do this video for you. So first of all, thanks to Video My Job, who have set this up on this kit. I managed to turn this video around actually in about 10 minutes, so that's Video My Job. So thanks to those guys who are vendors here in Australia, and thanks as always to Rodrigo and Social Recruiting Days and all my friends who are there, Anna and Jamie and Joe and many sort of friends who I know are in Berlin. I'm no doubt having a great time and a great conference. So I've been asked to talk to you about the topic on the agenda, or my case study, which is HR and why we're fucking it up. I'm got myself really passionate around this topic, really, and it's something I've been speaking about around the world, which is kind of puzzling because you could kind of kick off and say, well, what do you know? I mean, I'm a white male, I'm heterosexual, middle class, 2 children, 2 dogs. I'm not going to say normal. I don't think any of us are normal, but you might say conventional, what people might regard as a conventional family. And yet, I've really become passionate about the topic of diversity and inclusion over the last few years. And in particular, this is driven by my children. I have 2 children who are 19 and 17. I have a son who's gay and a daughter who's bipolar. And as you have children getting older, you really sit down and think, what is the workplace that I want them to inherit? What do I want to leave for my children, as any parent might think? What do I actually want to leave for them that will be different, that will be worthwhile, that will be different from my generation? And it's very easy when we talk about these things to think about the technology, to think about things like Facebook, and Facebook at work, and Google, and Amazon, and all, and eBay, and all, and Deliveroo, and Uber, and all these different kind of technologies and AI, artificial intelligence, things that we've been talking about, that really make me think, well, that's there's technology that they're going to inherit, which is going to enable them to do their jobs in different ways, to work in a different way, to go into a much more connected world. And I can say that's there, but I've had very little to do with that other than maybe influencing it in my small bubble of recruiting, which many of us share. And then there's the work that I've done working within HR and speaking at conferences and thought leadership, if you want to call it that, that I've had over the last, been fortunate enough to share my thoughts and my words and my and things that I think over the last, really over the last number of years, to try and get people understanding what I'm thinking and what I'm thinking, where we're going, and hopefully influencing the thinking of some people as to where we're going. And then it comes to something really important, which is, what is this workplace they're going to inherit? What's it going to look like? How is it going to be different? I have a daughter, and I've got to consider, do I want to leave a workplace where, or do I want a workplace for my daughter where it's going to be paid somewhere in the region of 20% less than her male counterparts? And if at some point she chooses or elects to have a baby, what impact is that going to have? If my son, what impact is that going to have in her career? Is that going to bring the end of time? Is that going to work against her because she's a woman? Is she going to be looked at and measured differently for a job? And my son, exactly the same thing. Is he going to be viewed in a different way because of his gender orientation, that they choose to be called they rather than he? So, and pronouns are a really important thing. So, and then we get the other bit, which for me is the emotional connection with work. So, is this going to be a workplace where they can be as successful or unsuccessful as they choose to be, based on their performance and nothing else, not based on their colour, not based on privilege or disadvantage, social class, gender, ethnicity, whatever it might be. And that's something that I want to try and influence. So I did a lot of soul searching around this topic to really think about one of the things that I've done that I think have fucked this up, that have made the world worse. And I'm talking about coming at it with good intentions, as I think lots of people listening to this video or listening to this talk will be thinking that way. We know, for example, that people are more threatened right now. People are more threatened by technology, by changes in technology. No doubt we've had talk from a recruiter's point of view today in Berlin, as we have here in Sydney, where people are saying, are the robots coming for my jobs? Is it the end of my time? Is this crazy stuff that's going to happen to me? And that's scary. That's concerning. People are threatened by difference. We have a big argument around. I know you've had the excellent Joe Lockwood delivering a keynote in Berlin, and I've learned a lot of things from Joe. Joe is really one of my go-to transgender advisors, really, of someone who, as an ally, I can talk to and get a point of reference, because that's really what I think we're missing, is that we have great intentions, but we don't always have points of reference. We don't have people we can go to and say, please advise us with this. And if we're not from that background, if we are from background, for example, without mental health, because mental health issues, depression, bipolar and so on, run in families. That's why it's something in my family, so I'm very aware and conscious of it, but equally there'll be families out there where people have had no exposure or point of reference to mental health. Really interesting statistic I want to share with you is 60%, when asked in a survey last year, of quite a significant number of people, I think it was something around about 200,000, said they wouldn't talk to a disabled person. And their motive behind not talking to a disabled person was not that they felt they could catch that disability, that if they spoke to someone in a wheelchair, they'd end up in a wheelchair, or someone who was challenged by height or someone, they'd suddenly become really short. But they were challenged by the fact that they didn't know what they were going to say, so they were scared they were going to say the wrong thing. That really scares me, that we have a world where at least 60% of people won't talk to people who are disabled because they don't have a point of reference, that they're concerned about saying the wrong thing or causing upset, and as a result probably causing greater damage. People are threatened by difference. If we look around the world, closest to home for us is Brexit. Brexit for me in Britain is when we turn around to the rest of the world and said, we turn around to the rest of the world, or certainly the rest of Europe, and our friends in Germany and everybody else who were in the conference, and said, we don't want to be a part of you guys. And that brought with it lots of issues around immigration in particular. So just for immigration, I've got a message for anyone looking in, anyone feeling threatened or concerned about immigration. This is a shirt that I made yesterday. I'm hoping you can read that. But really, it's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about foreigners and immigration, open borders, refugees in particular cause particular terror in people. If we look to America, kind of really frightening. We've always looked to America for, to some extent, wisdom and leadership in the world, or to be the bastion of the free world, burning the pillar. And only yesterday, reference to transgender was removed from the statute books, was removed from government websites. So effectively saying transgender didn't exist, and all previous laws have been removed under the basis of religious freedom, in that any kind of reference to LGBTIQ plus, or in particular around the trans community, was in some way in conflict with religious beliefs. And the Religious Freedoms Bill has meant that a lot of those rights have been eroded very quickly. And what we've learned is, in a lot of kind of right, we're seeing a rise of right wing and right-wing thinking, particularly around immigration, where a movement of people, but in this area equally, in the UK, we're seeing a major battle over self-declaration for anyone to declare themselves as a changed gender, for reasons of currently, in order to change your gender, you need to do that as a legal process, which means you need to go to a doctor. I think I'm technically correct in this, but you need to go to a doctor and be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which can, in some circles, be considered a mental disorder, or in order to access surgery, in order to access your right to be a different gender, whether that's male or female, cis or non-cis, binary or non-binary. So there's a lot of crazy shit going on, really. There's a lot of things that are going on that say people are frightened by change and they're threatened by the status quo. I'm hearing at home the battle around transgender is always around the bathrooms, right? Which bathrooms are people going to use? And one of the things I'm hearing from groups of women, and we have to acknowledge that and listen to that, is hard fought rights in the battle for womanhood. But I don't remember opening a history book and reading about the battle of the bathroom, about who would be entitled to use the bathroom. There's kind of a crazy illogical part about that argument that says the complaint is always around trans women but never around trans men. I've never heard anyone say I'm really worried about a woman using my bathroom, right? So and we have lots of mixed gender bathrooms anyway, so there's a lot of this crazy background going on that we have to think about, that and be aware of, that in our functions impact our colleagues and our friends and our families and the people that we work with, because we know when people are scared, they do some crazy stuff. Frightened people do crazy things. That's why we're seeing the world that we live in, with some of the votes going the way that they are over Brexit or Trump or whatever it might be. And we've got to look at it and say, what is our role? What is our role in HR? What is our role in talent acquisition? In recognising this problem? Well, we can either say it's the world outside and there's not a lot we can do about it, or we can actually look at it. We talk a lot in recruiting and talent acquisition at HR that we really need to be more human, and we have to be more human, hashtag and everything else. When actually the reality is not we need to be more human, but we need to see more humanity. That's really what my appeal is to you today. Anyone still sticking around watching this video, is we think about how do we bring humanity to the work that we do? How do we bring humanity into selection, into sourcing, into attraction, into HR, into the world that we live? And can we be the problem? And I know certainly that I have. And I want to start this discussion really around diversity and inclusion. So we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and in talking a lot about D&I think we've also talked a lot about diversity and inclusion, where the focus that we have, as very often in HR or talent acquisition, is on the D part of that, the diversity part of that. And what we're doing with that challenge around diversity is we're looking at numbers, we're looking at quotas, we're looking at how we represent ourselves in our employer branding, in our attraction, in doing things like recommending numbers for shortlists. We work numbers and quotas and metrics. Very good at that in recruiting. That's kind of a language we understand, and yet we don't really think about the inclusion. So my question for you is, are we actually making the situation worse? Are we creating a pipeline where we're hiring women into roles, or transgender into roles, or people from different socio-economic backgrounds? Because what is diversity? Diversity is difference, right? It's people who are different. And there's the obvious things like the male, female, LGBTIQ, all this kind of stuff. The obvious things, but socio-economic background, wealth, class, you might call that in England, or previously, if we might also look at other differences like education, political difference, beliefs, religions, faith. I think what it's like sometimes being a Muslim in a background of Islamophobia when I'm thinking about this, and also sometimes looking at recruiting teams. I see a lot of what gets posted on Facebook and so on, and thinking, if you believe this about Muslims, or if you believe this about whatever faith or religion or gender that might be, how does that actually impact your selection decisions when you've got 2 or 3 candidates to choose between? So it's your bias coming in. It's not so much an unconscious bias question as a bias question. We have to challenge that. We have to look at it and say, when people get here, can they give of their best? Are we building our thinking around inclusion and getting the inclusion right before we try and tackle the diversity? Or are we trying to tackle the things that we can measure, which are the numbers and the obvious bits? So when we're making things worse, are we, with our best, most honest intentions that I've always had, making situations worse? And I got thinking about this at a conference. It was another conference, Unleash in London, the excellent Unleash events. And I was running a panel, and then we had a round table, and in the round table, somebody brought something up which has really stuck with me to this day. And they said, I work at an employer, I won't mention them on video, but it's a well-known employer in the UK, who've also won awards for diversity and inclusion for the people that they hire. And she said, the last thing I want to do is join the gay developers group of this employer. Although I'm automatically, as soon as I identified as being gay, invited to join this group. What I actually want to do, and I said, well, what group do you want to join? And they said, I want to join the World of Warcraft group. And this was a really interesting conversation, because when I explored it a little bit later, over a few beers later in the evening, what was actually said to me, what they said to me was that I want to be defined as an engineer first and gay second. I don't mind people knowing that I'm gay, and that I recognise that may be helpful for other people to see someone in a senior or management position being highlighted. The last thing I want to do is be making videos about my gayness before I make videos about my engineering, or to be included in content, or to join a gay group before I join an engineers group. Everything that's being offered to me actually excludes me rather than includes me in what's going on. I thought about that for lots of things, like women in engineering awards, women in engineering promotions, using women or disabled or any kind of group that we want to try and highlight in our Aboriginal here in Australia. Different kinds of groups that we use to put on our website and say, look at us, look how great we are at this stuff. And it's what we're actually doing, highlighting the fact that we're different, and we're judging people by difference first and not similarity. And should we actually be turning on its head? And I know I've been really guilty of that, of exploring similarity. I've been exploring difference in people rather than exploring similarity. Now, at the same time, monitoring and metrics and numbers are very important, so we understand the situation, so we can identify we have a problem. If we're not attracting, particularly in talent acquisition, if we're not attracting from the right groups, we need to then go away and have a look at the markets or the ways in which we're targeting, the content that we're using, particularly the words that we use. We look at products like Textio, some people have heard of, and others, the gender decodifier, different products that actually kind of shake us and say the words that we're using or the way that we're writing our ads or whatever we're doing is being unfriendly in this way. Cedar is a great site to look at for kind of gender decoding and scoring. So are we exploring similarity and saying we are all engineers and we are all different, or are we saying some of us are gay and we're engineers, some of us are women and are engineers, some of us are disabled and we're engineers, some of us are left-wing and we're engineers, some of us are Christian and we're engineers, some of us are Muslim or Jehovah's Witness or whatever it might be? Does that divide us or does that unite us in what we're doing? Good example when we talk about women in engineering is somebody that I know when I was working at the BBC turned down the biggest Women in Engineering award on stage and actually said, I don't want this because I don't want to be known as the best woman engineer, but I'm very happy to be known as the best engineer who's a woman. So I want you to think about that. How are we defining people in our branding, in our attraction, in our recruiting, in our selection, in what we're saying to hiring managers? How are we doing that? And are we giving everyone the opportunity to be unique in their workplace? Now, this is something that a saying. I'm going to have a tattoo done probably next year. It'll be my first ever tattoo at 53 years old. You'd think I would have grown up by now, but I have a tattoo done which says something, and it's not from me, it's from the great Oscar Wilde, and it says, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Everybody is unique. Do we look at the uniqueness of people to understand that? So I'm going to quote Joe Lockwood from Joe's presentation. I've no doubt she said it to you in the keynote. It's something that sticks with me, and I've been written to a couple of times to say it wasn't actually Joe who wrote this originally. It was actually an Afro-Caribbean American. I want to use the quote, and the first time I heard it was from Joe Lockwood, which is, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. So I want to know what are we doing in our organisations? What are we doing in our talent attraction? What are we trying to achieve? Are we inviting people to the party? Putting them on the sidelines, or are we asking them to dance? Do we celebrate great women engineers, or do we celebrate great engineers who happen to be women, who can be role models, who can be supportive? Do we pay for work, not people? This is how we get equality of pay. This is how we address the gender pay gap, is to look at a job on a role, and I know how challenging that might be in your organisation. Not ask people in interview or selection what salary they're looking for, and not select them on the basis of pay or their previous pay, but to look at what should we pay a person to do this job. What is this job worth as a contribution to an organisation? That's the only way we're going to really start to battle those things called gender pay. We're moving into the age of AI, and that means the more machines and algorithms are going to make recommendations or make decisions, we've got to make sure the data we use is diverse. This is the problem that Amazon, you would have heard about, probably been mentioned about at least 5 of the presentations. Amazon couldn't come up with a matching machine that didn't eliminate women from the selection, and obviously became a problem. So, and why was that? Because the data wasn't diverse. The data which we use for consumer is very different to the data which we use in HR. So we need to think about that and say, actually, what data are we using to drive our machines and our algorithms, and are we being diverse? Otherwise, what we're going to be doing is taking our bias, taking our historical bias of looking for women engineers rather than engineers who are women, or selecting people in that way, putting it on steroids and impacting our organisations. Think about the way that we talk, the way that we promote ourselves. Don't ask people to join your tribe or join your family, unless you are a tribe or a family business. Because what you're promoting there is you're excluded, you're not welcome, it's a closed shop. Think about a different way of promoting, presenting what you do. Think about what we think are underlying core beliefs. I'm going to give you a quote. Women lack loyalty, expect regular promotions, and want it all now. And I'm hoping some of you are outraged by that statement, that women lack loyalty, expect regular promotions, and want it all now. Or was that millennials? I'm very happy talking about millennials and saying, well, all of the people who are millennial under a certain age have these expectations. We'll leave, we'll go and do this stuff. And old people, 40 plus, are not connected and don't know how computers work. Very quick, we talk about the kids in work, old people in work, the problems that might cause. And you've probably heard a few people bringing this up in conferences, when actually we need to properly think about that and think, are we judging millennials in a way which is prejudiced, in which we would never judge people by gender or race because of their age or maybe their socio-economic background? What message do we put out when we go out into the market? We talk about working hard and playing hard. What do we tell people we are as an organisation? Actually, that's code for we go to the pub. If you don't go to the pub, if you happen to be a reformed alcoholic or a Muslim, or maybe you just don't want to go to the pub, or God forbid you want to go home and spend some time with your family, you're not going to be welcome in this organisation. We're not going to be ready for you. Think about social mobility, because right now social mobility is the benefit of the rich. I saw a very good product, I think it was called Rise, from an organisation in London at the Excellent Talent Tech Rising event in London, when we, myself and Anna Ott and Hungary, looked at technology. What I really liked about them was they developed a ranking system for ranking people from disadvantaged backgrounds against people from advantaged backgrounds. So someone achieving a couple of A levels, say grade D, be ranked as someone achieving 2 A levels, grade A, if you considered that they'd had paid for lunches or came from a one-parent family or a foster background or disruptive background. I think that needs a bit of thought and design, but pretty important, social mobility. When we just employ graduates, we just end up with the same people. We get that particularly when we talk about only hiring hypos, high performers, building our algorithms and our systems and our recruiting around high performance or culture fit. Culture fit is a big one for us recruiters. How many of our candidates get rejected by hiring managers on the grounds of culture? They're not going to fit. What do we mean by that? Does that mean they're not the same colour? Does that mean they're not the same class? Does that mean they didn't go to the same type of school, or they don't speak with the same kind of accent? Should we really be challenging that as the workplace we want? So what does it actually take for high performance? And culture fit, what do we mean by culture fit? Culture fit means hiring more and more people who look and feel the same. Hiring for similarity, not difference. Challenge that in your organisations. That's what I'm calling on you to do. When I talk about the future, is to challenge culture fit, to challenge think around sameness, that we always hire the same people for the same things. Think about how you deal with things in the workplace like transition, LGBTQIA. How would you deal with that if someone wanted to change gender? What would be your point of reference? How would you think about it? How would you make it a welcoming workplace? Start by looking at your pronouns. He, she, they. It's important. Know what your pronouns are, know when you've got to apply them, and understand that genders are not for you. Genders are for other people, help you to understand where they fit in and how you address people. And afford people the courtesy of addressing them correctly. Think about how it feels when you get called by the wrong name. Understand that we have politics in a political situation, Brexit, Trump, whatever it might be. And we have Facebook. That equals a problem. That's a problem where our people are going to come under more and more pressure, more and more stress and depression issues we're seeing linked to social media use and so on. And this is things which are going to come into work and select people. So this is my last challenge to you. Are you ready to get inclusive so that we can get it right and create a great future for my children and yours? Thanks everybody. I look forward to seeing you soon.